Hello all. Today I'm here with Lionel Rodrigues. Lionel is the Principal Director of IFM Securities. He is a practicing advisor and has been since 1998. Lionel also has made a submission to government in relation to DFBO Tranche 2. In that submission, he covers, or we will ask him the question to cover off on the client advice record. My experience has been in recent times that in conversation with a number of advisors, that the advisor's belief is that the client advice record is the statement of advice simply by another name. So I'd like to ask you, Lionel, having made the submission to government, what your view is on the client advice record and the potential for improvement in advisor efficiency as a result.
No, thank you, Phil. Well, yeah, it's a subject dear to my heart, only because as an advisor and having studied this part of the law for the last few years, it strikes me that we are hampered by excessive compliance that leads to clients generally not getting accessible and affordable advice. And that was the basic precepts of the Quality of Advice Review. So as a function of the QAR, Quality of Advice Review, we have a couple of tranches, and the latest tranche of the delivering better financial outcomes is tranche number 2. And it appears that there's substantial interest by the advice community on this issue of the CAR, the client advice record. Now, being involved in the AAOFP and looking after the interests of advisors as well as clients, we've made submissions to the Minister Jones, and Treasury, as to how this remapped SOA would look like. And that was a recommendation of the Quality Advice Review that Michelle Levy did. She did a good job on this. And so I am somewhat pleased to see that the representations we made to Treasury and to the Minister have come about in the form of this client advice record, CAR. Now, I've seen in the popular press it's fairly contentious as to this CAR as an SOA by another name. And that has been occupying the popular press. I and some others, very small others, but have a contrary view, to the extent that the legislation, as you read it, the draft legislation, as all legislation, is quite cumbersome. But look beyond that and read, and people don't seem to do this, the intention of the Parliament is contained in the memorandum, the information memorandum that gives rise to the thinking as to the legislation. Now, when you read that document, which it appends to the draft legislation, the CAR and the statement of advice are completely different pieces of work. So the CAR is effectively the advice document, and the intent of the Parliament is that the advice and the record keeping are two distinct and separate pieces of work that an advisor is required to do. So it steps out clearly. The name change, SOA, CAR, yeah, I accept that, but it steps out what the CAR must contain. And it's only got 6 elements in it. And they're all the elements you would have. Someone comes up, asks for advice, you scope out the advice, give them the advice, you declare the fees and conflicts, how it would be beneficial for them. So the CAR legislation steps that out. That is absent from the SOA legislation. Now, come back to the SOA legislation. The law simply says it must be written and presented to be in a clear, concise and effective manner. Same thing with the CAR. But somehow, between the legislation and practice, we get somewhere between 30 and 100 pages of SOA. The CAR legislation is prescriptive in the sense that it says you only have to look at 6 elements only. That is the advice. Record keeping is a totally separate exercise. Now, why is that important? Why? And I want to get this message across, because it's the first time that the legislator have recognised, and they say that in the explanatory memorandum, that they want you to use your professional judgment. The first time this is used since the 2019 enactment of the FACE legislation, where they welcomed us as Australia's newest profession. They're now saying, look, with this new piece of legislation, we want you to be as professional as we want you to be, and like everyone else. So your advice is to be succinct, but the record keeping, you use your judgment as well as using judgment advice, but they are two separate things. Right now, it's the one document. When this advice is challenged, someone's unhappy, their first port of call is AFCA. And the Australian Financial Complaints Authority have stated categorically they think an SOA should be no more than 5 or 6 pages. Well, that's what this CAR is all about. You can then back it up with other information, but the substance of the advice is 5 or 6 pages. It's exactly what this piece of legislation provides.
Without actually nominating a percentage, but obviously this will improve advisor efficiency significantly. I mean, do you have a view on that?
No, absolutely. I mean, I'm pleased that Minister Jones studiously and cautiously put this together, but the recommendations we made were that the advice should be succinct and cover certain specific areas. Minister Jones has rightfully done this, right? So he's given advisors, number one, clear direction on how that advice should be tabled, but not how the advice should be given, right? And that's really important because it allows an advisor to actually put down what they believe is a strategy in the best interest of the client. And we should never lose sight of that. And Minister Jones was always concerned about the consumer, and rightfully so. Now, if we have succinct advice, very clear direction of advice, it does allow the advisor to deal with more clients and also reduces the cost of compliance. The cost of the advice should fall.
Excellent. I mean, obviously dealing with more clients and dealing with them in a more efficient way, A, helps more people, but secondly, creates a much better business.
Look, we were talking before, I mean, I've been in business since 1998, and I can almost tell you no one reads 30 to 100 pages.
Yeah.
But will they read 5 or 6? I think they will read 5 or 6 pages. And it's easier for a professional advisor to go through the main points of what the client required, what the advice is, how they will benefit, and what the costs are. This is very clearly stated. These are clear issues, and so it cannot hurt the consumer, whereby none of those things are present in the current SOA legislation. So to say they're the same thing is a bit of a misunderstanding of the intent of the Parliament.
Very good. Look, thanks for your time today.
More than welcome. Happy to
Lionel,
do it.
you've given us a view into the future, and
Excellent.
thanks for giving up your time to be here with us today.
More than welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.